I want you to stop whatever you're doing right now. Put down your phone for a second. No, actually keep holding it, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that will stay with you long after you've finished listening. My name is Marcus Hale. Most people who've known me long enough call me Stone. I'm 49 years old, and I've spent most of my life walking into rooms where nobody wanted me there. I learned early that the world doesn't hand you belongings. You earn it. Sometimes you earn it in places so far from home that the stars look different at night, and the language sounds like music you don't yet know the words to. And I need to tell you about the day someone tried to erase everything I had built. Not with a conversation, not with a phone call, not even with the basic dignity of looking me in the eye. She did it with an email. At 38,000 feet, over the Pacific Ocean. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. Because this story deserves to travel. It deserves to reach every person who has ever given everything they had to something, only to have someone younger and shinier walk in and decide that everything they built was just overhead. Here's where it started. I was somewhere over the Pacific, about 4 hours into what should have been an 11-hour flight from Chicago to Tokyo. Flight 889, economy class, because the new regime at the company had decided that men like me, experienced, expensive, irreplaceable, though they hadn't figured out that last part yet, should be sitting in the back with our knees against the seat in front of us. Used to be business class when the old man ran things. Used to be a lot of things. The airplane Wi-Fi was slow, the way airplane Wi-Fi always is when it's carrying news you don't want. The subject, line loaded first. Organizational restructuring, immediate action required. I've been in the Army. 20 years, Special Forces, the kind of service that teaches you to read the shape of a sentence before the words fully form. I knew what that subject line meant before the body of the email even loaded. But I waited. I sat there in my middle seat with my burnt airline coffee, and I waited for the words to appear on the screen like a soldier waiting for confirmation of what he already knows in his bones. 3 paragraphs of corporate language. Words like strategic realignment. Operational efficiency. Effective immediately. Not once did the email use the word fired. But that is exactly what it was. The woman who sent it was named Victoria Ashford. 29 years old. MBA from Wharton. A detail she mentioned in most conversations because she believed that a degree was the same thing as wisdom, that a credential was the same thing as character. She was the daughter of the man who built the company I had spent 17 years giving my soul to, and 12 months ago, her father had placed her in a VP chair and told the world she was the future. She sent that email at 6:47 in the morning, Eastern Time, before most people had poured their first coffee, before the building security had even switched on the lobby lights. She sent it to a man on a plane, a man who was flying through the night to try to save a $180 million contract, and she didn't copy her father. She didn't pick up the phone. She typed her 3 paragraphs in the quiet of her morning, probably with her green tea going cold beside her laptop, and she pressed send. She did not know what she had just set in motion. And here's where I need to stop and tell you who I actually am, because the rest of this story won't make sense without it. I was born in Toledo, Ohio. My father worked the Jeep plant until production moved overseas, and the day I graduated high school in 1984, I walked into a recruiter's office and enlisted in the United States Army. Not because I was brave, because I was practical. The factory jobs were leaving, and I wasn't going to wait around for something that wasn't coming back. What I found in the Army was something I hadn't expected to find anywhere. Purpose, precision, brotherhood. I made Special Forces, which is not a thing that happens easily or often, and I spent the next 2 decades learning that the most important thing you can ever do in any room, in any country, in any language, is show up with respect and mean it. The Army sent me to the Defense Language Institute, where they teach you Japanese the way they teach you everything in the military. Fast, hard, and with the clear expectation that you'll use it in conditions that are less than comfortable. I did tours in Okinawa. I served. In Korea. I had missions in Southeast Asia that I still cannot discuss, will never discuss, and have long since made a certain peace with carrying alone. I left the service in 2004 as a master sergeant. Honorable discharge. Full benefits. and a particular set of skills that the private sector doesn't often know how to name, but absolutely knows how to need. For a couple of years, I did contract work, logistics, security consulting, the kind of steady, boring work that keeps the lights on. And then one Tuesday in 2007, a man named Gerald Ashford called me personally. Gerald was old money and new instincts. He'd built Ashford Defense System from a garage in Cicero, Illinois in 1978, starting with a Coast Guard radio repair contract and building it through sheer force into a company that was pulling down $2 billion a year in federal work by the time I met him. He was the kind of man who remembered your name after one conversation and meant it when he called you the best. He told me he had a Japanese partner who needed managing, someone who understood the Pacific, someone who could sit across from a 74-year-old chairman in Osaka and not embarrass the company or the relationship. That partner was Osaka Industries. That chairman was Kenji Yamamoto. And the relationship I am about to describe to you, a relationship now worth hundreds of millions of dollars in active defense contracts, was built by exactly two people. Gerald Ashford, who opened the door, and me, who walked through it and never left. Those early trips to Osaka, Gerald would fly with me. He'd sit in first class with a scotch he'd actually finish and tell me stories about building something from nothing. He'd say I was the best hire he'd ever made. Back then, he meant every word. Back then, the company was still his. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to tell you about what I gave up for this work. I need to tell you about Sarah. Sarah was my wife. She died 4 years ago. Breast cancer. She fought it for 18 months while I was flying back and forth to Asia every quarter, building partnerships and securing contracts, and making myself indispensable to a company that would eventually decide I was expendable. I was in Osaka, in a hotel room that cost the company $300 a night, when she called me at 3 in the morning, local time, to tell me the doctors had stopped treatment. I want you to understand what that means. I want you to sit with that for a moment, the way I sat with it in the dark of that hotel room on the other side of the world, holding the phone so tight my knuckles hurt. The woman I had married when I was a broke enlisted man with nothing but potential and possibility. She was telling me she had maybe 6 weeks left. I flew home the next day. I spent those 6 weeks with her. But the 18 months before that, I was building relationships. I was securing the future of company. I was choosing work over the woman who had waited for me, believed in me, raised our sons while I was deployed, and loved me with a patience I did not deserve and never took for granted enough. We have 2 sons. Cole is 23 now, graduated from the Naval Academy, Marine lieutenant stationed in Virginia. Everett is 20, junior at Ohio State, business major like his mother always wanted. Smart kids, strong kids. They understood duty the way only military kids understand it, because they'd watched their father practice it their entire lives. It doesn't make it easier. It never makes it easier. After Sarah passed, the work became everything. The Yamamoto relationship became everything. And somewhere in those grief-soaked years of flights and meetings and signed agreements, I stopped noticing how much of myself I had poured into something that belonged to someone else. And then Victoria Ashford typed 3 paragraphs and pressed send. I closed my laptop somewhere over the Pacific. I picked up my coffee. I looked out the window at nothing but dark water and darker sky. And I didn't react. Not yet. 20 years in Special Forces teaches you that the first thing you feel is almost never the thing you should act on. There were still 7 more hours of ocean ahead of me. And I'm very, very good at sitting with things. Stay with me. Because what happens next, what I found when I landed, what I discovered in my kitchen, what happened in that conference room 10 days later, will show you exactly what it looks like when someone mistakes your silence for surrender. Here's something Victoria Ashford never knew about me. Here's something she never thought to ask. 7 years ago, when the Ashford-Osaka partnership was still new and fragile and needed to be written down so that both sides understood exactly what they were committing to, Gerald and I sat across from Chairman Yamamoto's legal team in a conference room in Osaka. The negotiations took 3 days. I translated when the translators got tired. I meditated when the language got technical. I was the bridge between 2 worlds that had every reason to mistrust each other and had chosen, because of patient and careful work, to trust instead. When a master partnership agreement was finalized and signed, Gerald himself gave me a copy. Not a photocopy, the original. He pressed it into my hands and said, "You earned this more than I did." I keep that agreement in the bottom drawer of my desk at home, next to Sarah's prayer book and the boys' Little League trophies. Section 4, Paragraph B, the Designated Liaison Clause. It states, in language that took 3 days and 2 legal teams to craft, that all primary communications, contract negotiations, and face-to-face meetings between Ashford Defense Systems and Osaka Industries would be conducted through me. Marcus Hale, Director of International Partnerships. Any change to that arrangement required 60 days written notice to Osaka Industries and written approval from Chairman Yamamoto's office. Victoria never read Section 4. She never read any of it. She was too busy modernizing things. Let me tell you about Victoria, because I want you to understand what I was dealing with. Victoria Page Ashford, 29 years old, Wharton MBA. She joined the company 14 months before she fired me, handed the title of VP of Strategy by a father who loved her in the way that sometimes blinds good men to the damage their love can do. Before Ashford Defense, she'd spent 8 months at a consulting firm in New York. 8 months of professional experience. 8 months before her father placed her in charge of strategy for a $2 billion defense contractor. She introduced herself to me on her second day. I remember it clearly because she mentioned Wharton in her first sentence and asked about my educational background in her third. When I told her, Army Special Forces Defense Language Institute, 17 years in the field, something moved across her face. Not quite contempt. Something cooler than that. Classification. She was filing me under legacy employee and calculating what I cost versus what she thought I was worth. She had opinions about everything and experience with almost nothing. She talked about digital transformation and agile methodology and customer experience optimization with the confidence of someone who has read about things but never had to live them. 6 weeks before she fired me, Victoria eliminated all international travel budgets. Every department, effective immediately. She sent a company-wide memo about modernizing the approach and leveraging digital communication tools. I filed a written objection through proper channels. It went to our general counsel, Patricia Nolan, and then to Victoria's desk. It was dismissed without discussion. I said nothing publicly. I adjusted. That is what you do when you've spent 20 years in Special Forces. You watch the terrain. You note the hostile positions. You don't assault a hardened target until you know what's behind it. But I knew what the travel freeze meant, because I knew something Victoria never stopped long enough to learn. Chairman Yamamoto was 74 years old. He had been conducting business face-to-face his entire life, and he had not survived decades in the defense industry by being careless about who he trusted. He measured commitment by presence. You didn't video call Kenji Yamamoto. You flew to Osaka. You sat across from him. You presented your business card with both hands and a slight bow. You waited for him to speak first. You pronounced his name correctly, every syllable, because he would hear the difference, and the difference would tell him everything he needed to know about how seriously you took him. I knew all of this because I had spent 17 years learning it. Victoria knew none of it and believed she didn't need to. The week before my Tokyo trip, Victoria called a department heads meeting. She stood at the head of the conference table with her laptop open and a cup of something green that smelled like a lawn after rain. She announced that the company was moving to a fully integrated digital communication strategy. No more flying people around the world for meetings that could be handled virtually. Our clients, she said, needed to adapt. It was 2024. Howard Ellison, our senior contracts manager, 15 years at the company, a solid man who wore the same 3 ties in rotation and had never once used the word synergy in a sentence, cleared his throat. Victoria, some of our international partners have specific protocols. Cultural expectations. The Yamamoto relationship, for instance. She cut him off. The Yamamoto relationship is exactly the kind of inefficiency I'm talking about. We're spending $200,000 a year flying stone across the Pacific to have conversations we could handle with email and video calls. She looked directly at me when she said it. Not Marcus. Not Mr. Hale. Stone. like I was a prop from an old war movie that the set decorator had forgotten to remove. With respect, I said, Chairman Yamamoto has specific requirements about how. Requirements we can modernize. I've already reached out to their U.S. office about transitioning to digital-first communications. She had not reached out. I would have known. Yamamoto's U.S. office was 2 people in a small suite in Century City who handled shipping logistics. They had no authority to change communication protocols. But I didn't say that. Not then. I made note. Filed it away. The morning I boarded that flight to Tokyo, I was going to meet with Yamamoto's deputy, a man named Sato, to prepare for the contract renewal. $180 million. The renewal meeting itself was scheduled 10 days out. Chairman Yamamoto was flying to Chicago personally for it. He doesn't do that for paperwork. He does it for relationships. And then at 38,000 feet, the email arrived. I landed at Narita, took the train into Tokyo, same route I'd taken 50 times before, watching the city unfold outside the window. The industrial districts, the business towers, the geometry of a society that understands that respect is not an inconvenience, but a foundation. I met Sato at a small restaurant near Yamamoto's office. He was polite, careful, precise. The way experienced Japanese businessmen are when they're about to deliver news that will require everyone in the room to maintain composure. Harrison-san, he said. You always call me Harrison. He had from the beginning, and I never corrected him because some things became their own kind of name. The chairman has concerns about recent communications from your company. There have been changes in our organization, I said. I'm here to address any concerns. He looked uncomfortable. The chairman values consistency, reliability, the relationship you have built over many years. A pause, a choice of words. There are questions about whether Ashford Defense still honors the traditional approaches. I looked at this man across the table in a restaurant in Tokyo, thousands of miles from the apartment where I used to sit with Sarah on Sunday mornings, and I told him the only thing I had left to offer. The truth. I told him I'd been terminated. I told him I didn't know what the company would do next. I told him I was sorry, not for my own sake, but for his, for the chairman's, for the years of careful work that were now in someone else's careless hands. Sato listened. He nodded once. He said he would inform the chairman. I bought my own return ticket home on my own credit card. $1,847. I didn't try to expense it. There was no one to expense it to. I landed at O'Hare on a Wednesday evening, took a cab to my apartment in Arlington Heights, and walked into a place that smelled like old coffee and silence. The kind of silence that has settled in since a person who filled it is no longer there. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened the bottom drawer. I pulled out the master partnership agreement and turned to Section 4, Paragraph B. Then I called my oldest friend. Raymond Torres and I served together in the 7th Special Forces Group. Communications Sergeant. 2 tours together, things I can't talk about, a friendship built in the kind of circumstances that either destroy people or bind them permanently. That was 25 years ago. Now Raymond is a licensed attorney in Virginia. Employment law and government contracts. The kind of friend you don't talk to for months, and then call at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday, and he picks up before the second ring. Stone, Ray, I need you to look at something. I read him the termination email. Then I read him Section 4, Paragraph B, the Designated Liaison Clause, the 60-day notice requirement, the mandatory approval from the chairman's office. Raymond was quiet for 8 seconds. I counted. She didn't send notice to Yamamoto. No. She didn't get approval from the chairman's office. No. Stone, this isn't just wrongful termination. This is breach of the partnership agreement itself. Yamamoto has contractual right to void the renewal without penalty. I could file by Friday. I looked at Gerald's signature next to mine on a page that represented 7 years of work and 20 years of earned trust. No, don't file anything. Not yet. Stone, what are you doing? I'm letting the mechanism work. There was a pause, and then Raymond, who has known me long enough to understand what my silence means, said nothing else. He trusted me the way men trust each other when they have been through things together that can't be explained. 9 days. That's all it took. Don't go anywhere. Because what happened in that conference room, What I watched from a distance while I sat in my apartment and did absolutely nothing is the part that changes everything. I did nothing. I want you to understand how deliberately, how consciously, how completely I did nothing. I didn't call Ashford. I didn't call Gerald. I didn't send letters or hire lawyers or leak documents or make calls I wasn't supposed to make. I sat in my apartment in Arlington Heights with Sarah's prayer book in the bottom drawer and the silence that comes from a life that has been emptied of its center, and I waited. In Special Forces, you learn to hold a position. You learn that the most dangerous thing you can do in a volatile situation is move before the moment is right. You learn that waiting is not the same as losing. Sometimes waiting is the only winning move. The weekend between the firing and the meeting, I drove down to Virginia. Cole had Liberty on Saturday evening. We found a barbecue place off base, real Virginia barbecue, the kind that takes all day and means it, and we sat across from each other with pulled pork and coleslaw, and I watched my son and tried to find Sarah's face in his. He looked at me over the table the way young men look at their fathers when they're trying to figure out what's actually happening. "You seem different, Dad." "Work situation," I said. "Good different or bad different?" I cut my brisket, chewed slowly. "Ask me next week." He nodded, 23 years old and already wise enough to hear what I wasn't saying. He gets that from his mother. "You know," he said quietly, looking down at his plate, "Mom always said you were at your most dangerous when you got real quiet." I looked at him for a long moment. Sarah's words, his voice, the way grief moves through families, not disappearing but transforming, finding new faces to speak through. She was a smart woman. Yeah, she was. We finished dinner, drove around base for a while, windows down in the evening air, talking about his unit and his plans and ordinary father-son things that should have been ordinary years ago, but had to be found now, after everything. The kind of conversations Sarah always wanted us to have more of. I could feel her wanting it, the way you can still feel what someone wanted even after they're gone. Monday, I did nothing. Tuesday, I did nothing. Wednesday morning, at 7:15 a.m., Howard Ellison showed up at my apartment door, holding a manila envelope and 2 cups of gas station coffee. Howard, who had 15 years at the company and 3 ties he wore in rotation and had built more trust quietly than Victoria would build loudly in her entire career. He looked at me in my doorway in a t-shirt with yesterday's coffee still sitting on the counter behind me. "Printed these last night after everyone left," he said, handing me the envelope. "Figured you should have them." 6 internal emails. I read them standing in the doorway with the morning air coming through the screen. The first was from Victoria to her brother Andrew, 2 weeks before my termination. "Hail is legacy infrastructure. The Yamamoto relationship needs centralization under strategy. 1 point of contact. Digital first. No more flying someone across the Pacific every quarter for relationship maintenance that should be automated. Legacy infrastructure. That's what 20 years of earned trust looked like to her. Infrastructure. Something to be automated away." The second was Victoria to Patricia Nolan, responding to Patricia's memo about Section 4. "Patricia, I've reviewed your concerns about the liaison clause. This is exactly the kind of legacy friction I was brought in to eliminate. We're not going to let outdated contract language dictate our operational efficiency. Move forward with the restructuring. Move forward. 2 words. $180 million. The arrogance of someone who has never had to build anything, deciding that the things built by others are simply in the way. The third email stopped me cold. Victoria to Andrew. The morning of my termination, 6:12 a.m., 35 minutes before she sent me the email over the Pacific. Hale won't push back. He's widowed, paying college tuition, 49 years old. He's not going to find another position like this in the current market. He'll grumble, maybe consult a lawyer, but he'll settle quietly because he needs the income. Standard severance package, and we move on. I read that 3 times. Standing in my doorway, with the morning air on my face, and Howard watching my expression with the careful attention of a man who has spent 15 years learning to read rooms. He won't push back. He's widowed. She had used Sarah's death as a calculation. She had looked at the gap my wife left in my life and decided it made me manageable. She had taken the most painful thing I carry and turned it into a line in a strategic assessment. "You okay?" Howard said. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "I look exactly how I look, Howard." I folded the emails back into the envelope. "Thank you for these." He took a sip of his gas station coffee, stared at the middle distance the way good men do when they're deciding whether to say the thing they came to say. "The renewal meeting with Yamamoto is Thursday, 9 days from when she fired you. She's running the meeting herself. Her and Andrew. No cultural briefing. She told the prep team she'd handle introductions personally because she wants to, and I'm quoting here, establish a modernized communication framework." Silence. "Stone, Chairman Yamamoto is flying here personally for this meeting." "I know." Howard looked at me for a long time. "You're not going to do anything, are you? You're just going to let it happen." I picked up my coffee from the counter. Cold. I drank it anyway. "Some things you don't need to push, Howard. You just need to not be standing in front of them." He left. I closed the door. I put the envelope in the bottom drawer with the partnership agreement. And I sat at the kitchen table and did absolutely nothing for 6 more days. Drop in the comments. Have you ever known that something was about to fall apart, but stayed quiet and let it happen? Tell me what that felt like. Thursday came. I know what happened in that conference room because Howard texted me in real time, because Patricia Nolan documented it in her report to the board, and because Chairman Yamamoto's formal response afterward was written with the precision of an after-action report, the kind I used to write myself when something had gone exactly as anticipated and the record needed to reflect it clearly. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in Ashford's main conference room. Victoria had ordered fresh flowers, orchids, not chrysanthemums. She didn't know that the choice of flower communicated something. She didn't know that Yamamoto's office always provided chrysanthemums for meetings in Osaka, or that their absence in Chicago would be noted. She didn't know because she hadn't asked. She hadn't asked because she decided she already knew. Chairman Yamamoto arrived at 9:48 a.m. Dark navy suit. He traveled with Sato and a translator he didn't technically need, but always brought, because formality has structure, and structure communicates respect, and respect is not a soft thing, but the hardest currency in any serious negotiation. Victoria met him in the lobby. Charcoal blazer. Heels that clicked on marble. She extended one hand. Yamamoto paused. His translator's eyes moved to Sato. Sato's expression didn't change. Yamamoto shook her hand once. And in that pause, in the fraction of a second before the handshake, everything was already being decided. In the conference room, Victoria took the head of the table. She opened her laptop. Andrew sat to her right, quiet the way he always was when his sister had decided how things would go. She began at exactly 10 a.m. "Chairman Yamamoto, on behalf of Ashford Defense Systems, I want to welcome you and express how excited we are about this next phase of our partnership." She mispronounced his name. Yamamoto. 3 syllables, all of them wrong. She didn't correct herself because she didn't know she was wrong. Yamamoto's face didn't move. Sato's pen stopped writing. Victoria talked about digital-first communication frameworks and scalable defense solutions and optimized stakeholder engagement. She talked for 4 minutes without pausing. She didn't ask about his flight. She didn't ask about his family. She didn't acknowledge the 17-year relationship or mention my name. She performed a presentation at a man who had flown to Chicago for a conversation, and the distance between what she was offering and what he had come for was the distance between reading about a place and standing inside it. At the 6-minute mark, she opened a folder and slid the $180 million renewal contract across the table. She slid it. In Japanese business culture, you do not slide documents across the table. You stand. You walk to the person. You present with both hands a slight bow, the document oriented so they can read it immediately. You wait for them to receive it. This is not ceremony for ceremony's sake. This is how you demonstrate that you understand the weight of what you're asking someone to sign. Victoria slid a $180 million contract across polished wood like she was passing the check at a restaurant. Chairman Yamamoto looked at the document. He didn't touch it. He looked at Sato. He said 3 words in Japanese, quiet words, words that Howard later had translated and that I will share with you in a moment. Sato nodded. Yamamoto stood. He He buttoned his jacket with the deliberate patience of a man who has spent his entire life being deliberate. He said one sentence in English, the only English he spoke in the entire 12-minute meeting. "Where's Mr. Hale?" Victoria blinked. "Mr. Hale is no longer with the company. We've streamlined our—" "Thank you." He turned. Sato collected the translator. They walked out. The meeting had been scheduled for 90 minutes. It lasted 12. The contract sat on the table, exactly where Victoria had slid it, untouched. Howard texted me at 10:17 a.m. 3 words. They walked out. I set down my phone. I looked out my apartment window at Arlington Heights on a Thursday morning in October. I thought about Sarah. I thought about the hotel room in Osaka, where I'd held a phone at 3 a.m. I thought about all the miles and all the years and all the things you give and give and give without keeping a record of the giving. And then I thought about the 3 words Chairman Yamamoto had said in Japanese before he stood up. The translation, which Howard got later from a colleague, was this: "This room does not know what it has lost. Don't go anywhere." Because the next 24 hours were the ones that changed everything. For Victoria, for Gerald, for the company, and for me. The next day, Friday, at 3:15 in the afternoon, a courier from the Japanese consulate arrived at Ashford Defense's front desk. He carried one envelope. Heavy stock paper. Osaka Industries letterhead. The kind of envelope that doesn't require explanation before it's opened, because the weight of it tells you. Patricia Nolan read it first. She told me later that her hands were shaking by the second reading. The letter stated that Osaka Industries was withdrawing from all contract negotiations with Ashford Defense Systems, effective immediately. It cited 3 things with the precision of a legal instrument. My absence, as breach of Section 4, Paragraph B. The failure to provide 60 days written notice before removing the designated liaison, and the conduct of the renewal meeting itself, described as inconsistent with the standards Chairman Yamamoto required of partners. And then the final paragraph, the one that turned a business problem into a catastrophe. Ashford Defense Systems was placed on Osaka Industries' formal exclusion list. No future communications. No meetings. No negotiations of any kind. Effective immediately, to be reviewed in no fewer than 3 years. 3 years. The $180 million contract was gone. The projected $750 million pipeline, the work that was supposed to follow the renewal, the expansion Victoria had put in her growth slides and her strategy decks, was gone too. Not delayed. Not at risk. Gone. Placed behind a door that had just been locked from the inside. Patricia called Gerald at 4:30 that afternoon. He was at his house in Lake Forest. She could hear a Cubs game on the television when he answered. "Gerald, we have a situation." She read him the letter, the breach citation, the exclusion list, the full scope of what had happened, the full scope of what had been lost. Gerald was quiet for a long time. The Cubs game, Patricia said, had gone silent in the background. Maybe he'd muted it. Maybe it had simply stopped matching. "Where is Stone?" "He was terminated 12 days ago by Victoria. I don't have his personal number." She deactivated his company phone. Silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full. Full of the understanding of what a man has done and what he has allowed and what the cost of that allowance has turned out to be. Call an emergency board meeting. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Every member. The board meeting lasted 2 hours. 7 members present. Gerald at the head of the table in a golf shirt, no jacket, the weight of 46 years of building something pressing down on him in a conference room where a decision had to be made. The motion was introduced at 11:42 a.m. Removal of Victoria Ashford from VP of Strategy, effective immediately. Termination with cause. The vote was 7-0. Gerald abstained. He didn't vote against his daughter, but he didn't protect her either. He sat at the head of the table and let the board do what the board needed to do. And that abstention, that particular silence from a man who had never been silent about the things he loved, told everyone in the room everything they needed to know about how he felt. Monday morning at 8:15 a.m., Victoria walked through Ashford's lobby for the last time. Security met her at the elevator. The same 2 officers who had escorted me out 12 days earlier. She went pale, then very still, then walked out between them. Her heels clicked on the marble. The same sound they'd made when she greeted Chairman Yamamoto. Same sound, different direction. Andrew resigned the following week. No press release. No statement. He was gone from the building before most people knew he was going. Gerald resumed the chairmanship and began quietly looking for outside leadership to help him rebuild. And I was sitting in my apartment in Arlington Heights, doing what I had been doing for 12 days. Waiting. Not because I knew exactly what was coming, but because I had learned long ago that when you have done the right thing, when you have kept your promises and built your bridges with care and refused to burn them even when someone else was pouring the gasoline, eventually the world finds a way to reflect that back. 2 days after the board vote, my phone rang. New York number I didn't recognize. Mr. Hale, this is David Park, Executive Counsel for Osaka Defense Solutions, U.S. Division. I'm calling on behalf of Chairman Yamamoto's office. I set down my coffee. I'm listening. The chairman has authorized me to extend a formal offer. Vice President of Asia-Pacific Operations, Osaka Defense Solutions. The role would oversee all of Osaka's defense relationships in North America, in addition to serving as primary liaison for the company's international partnership development. I looked at my kitchen table, at the bottom drawer that held the partnership agreement and Sarah's prayer book, lying beside each other in the dark. The chairman also asked me to relay a personal message. He asked that I not translate it, and he said you would understand. There was a pause. He said, Harrison Sen keeps his promises. I didn't speak for a moment, just sat there in my kitchen, in the silence of an apartment that had been carrying my grief for 4 years, and let those 5 words land. Because I understood them completely, not just as a job offer, not just as validation, as something more personal than that, as recognition from a man who had built his entire career on the understanding that how you treat a relationship when no one is watching is the only measurement that matters. Harrison San keeps his promises. I thought about the hotel room in Osaka where I had held a phone at 3 a.m. and heard my wife tell me she had 6 weeks. I thought about the months I had flown across the ocean while she was sick. I thought about the kind of man I had been and the kind of man I was trying still to be. I thought about Sarah's prayer book in the bottom drawer. I thought about Cole throwing a baseball in a parking lot. I thought about Everett calling from Ohio State. I thought about the fact that the only truly indestructible thing I had built in my entire career was trust. Not contracts, not relationships in the transactional sense, but the deep, quiet thing underneath. The understanding between 2 people that when one of them says a thing, he means it, and when he makes a commitment, he keeps it, regardless of what it costs him. Tell the chairman I'm honored, I said, and tell him I accept. Keep reading. Because the last part of the story isn't about the job or the contract or any of it. It's about what comes after, and that's the part that made everything worth it. That Saturday, I drove to Cole's base. He had a weekend pass. We threw a baseball in the parking lot behind the barracks for an hour. Just the 2 of us in the October air, the kind of afternoon that doesn't announce itself as significant while it's happening, but that you carry with you for the rest of your life. He threw the ball to me, and I threw it back. And we talked about nothing in particular the way fathers and sons do when they finally found the ease they spent years searching for. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of afternoon that Sarah always wanted us to have, and that I had always been too busy, too traveling, too indispensable to everything else to make time for. You seem different, Dad, he said, catching the ball and turning in his hand. Different how? Less stressed. Like you're actually here when you're here. He threw it back. Like you're not already somewhere else. I caught it, held it for a moment. I'm going to keep coming to your games, son. He looked at me. Yeah. He smiled. It looked like his mother's smile. They always do, the ones that mean something. That night, Everett called. First real conversation we'd had since the funeral. He said he was coming home for Thanksgiving. He said he was proud of how I'd handled things, said he'd heard the whole story, the way kids always hear things you don't tell them directly, and that he thought I'd done it right. He said Mom would have been proud too. Maybe she would have been. I'll never know for certain. The way you never know anything for certain about the people you've lost. But I believe it. I carry it forward like it's true, because carrying it forward is the closest thing I have to telling her. I think about her in the airport now, when I'm heading to a new city for Osaka Defense Solutions, when I'm walking through security with a boarding pass that says VP and not director, when I'm on my way to a meeting that will matter for reasons that have nothing to do with digital-first frameworks or synergy optimization or any of the language that mistakes activity for accomplishment. I think about what she would say. I think she would say, "You finally stopped choosing between being good at your work and being present in your life." I think she would say, "It's about time." I think she would say, "Now don't miss the next one." There is something I want you to know about the way this story ended. Because I've been called lucky and I've been called smart, and I've been told by people who hear this story that I must have known how it would turn out, that I must have had a plan, that the quiet, the waiting, the patience, it must have all been strategic. It wasn't. Not entirely. The truth is that I sat in that apartment for 12 days and I did not know what would happen. I hoped. I believed, based on what I knew about Kenji Yamamoto and about the contract and about the way real trust functions in the world. But I did not know. And there were nights in those 12 days when I sat at my kitchen table in the dark and I thought about Sarah and I thought about the boys and I thought about what it means to spend 20 years building something and have it taken from you in 3 paragraphs by someone who thought your grief made you manageable. Those are not easy nights. But here's the thing I want you to take from this story. The thing that I believe, after 49 years of living and 20 years of service and 17 years of building relationships across cultures and oceans and silences, the most powerful thing you can do in the face of disrespect is refuse to become it. Victoria Ashford took the most painful thing in my life and used it as a variable in her calculations. She looked at my grief and saw leverage. And she was wrong, not just strategically, not just contractually, not just in terms of the business disaster that followed. She was wrong about what grief does to people. She was wrong about what loss builds in a person when that person has chosen, consciously, to be shaped by it rather than destroyed by it. Sarah did not make me weak. She made me capable of a kind of patience that has no shortcut. She taught me, by dying while I was still learning how to truly be present, by leaving me with the particular ache of things unsaid and mornings unlived together, that the only things that last are the ones built on real substance, on actual presence, on the willingness to sit across from someone, to learn their language, to pronounce their name correctly, to show up not because it's efficient, but because it's right. You cannot digitize that. You cannot optimize it. You cannot streamline it into an algorithm and call it modernized. You can only earn it. One relationship at a time. One flight at a time. One hand extended with both hands, slight bow, document turned so they can read it, waiting for them to receive it. That's what Victoria never understood. And that's why the mechanism worked without me ever having to touch it. Now here we are. I am writing this from a hotel in San Francisco, the night before I fly to Osaka for the first time in my new capacity with Osaka Defense Solutions. I'll be sitting across from Chairman Yamamoto in a conference room I know well, drinking tea I've learned to appreciate, speaking a language I earned the right to speak in a building in Monterey a very long time ago. And in my jacket pocket, I'm carrying a photograph. It's Sarah and me from the year we got married. I'm in my uniform because I was always in my uniform in those days. She's laughing at something. I don't even remember what now, which is its own particular loss. And she looks the way she always looked when something delighted her. Like the world had just shown her something she hadn't expected. I carry her with me. I always will. And to everyone who is listening to this, to everyone in every city this story has reached, to everyone who has ever been told by someone with shinier credentials that their experience is just expensive overhead, that their relationships can be automated, that their grief makes them easy to dismiss, I want you to hear this. You are not legacy infrastructure. You're the only thing that was ever real. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, if you have been underestimated, dismissed, replaced by someone who confused confidence for competence, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because the truth has a way of surfacing, and respect, real respect, isn't something that can be digitized, optimized, or streamlined away. It is earned one relationship at a time. And when it's gone, everyone notices the silence.